It began not with a press conference, nor with a viral interview, but with a single image. Grainy, sun-drenched, and framed with the unmistakable leisure of a Mediterranean horizon. A photo that should have never existed in the public domain, at least, not anymore. In that frozen frame, Meghan Markle, before the royal titles, before the global scrutiny, before the meticulously curated brand. It was a moment ripped from the past, and yet, it detonated like a bomb in the present. What followed was not a slow burn. It was immediate, unforgiving, and utterly explosive. The photo first appeared late one night on Colin Jost's Instagram story, just for a few seconds. Then again, this time on X, formerly Twitter, accompanied by a sarcastic caption that read, "Go back to your yacht days, Meghan." He didn't delete it. He didn't explain it. He didn't flinch. Within hours, the image and its crude message were shared tens of thousands of times. But it wasn't just the photo, there were others. More suggestive, more damning. They depicted Meghan in varying degrees of intimacy with men whose faces were strategically blurred or angled away. The implication wasn't subtle. And for those who had heard whispers over the years, rumors of yacht parties, high society circles, and transactional relationships, this wasn't just gossip anymore. It was ammunition. The world watched. And Meghan? She shattered. This wasn't some accidental leak. It was a calculated, targeted assault on a public figure who had spent the last half-decade trying to reframe her story. From Hollywood actress to Duchess of Sussex. From royal exile to podcasting pioneer. From a woman painted as a villain to one trying to reclaim her voice. But now, the internet had other plans. Suddenly, she was no longer the feminist speaker, the philanthropic face of social justice, the fierce mother and wife. She was, in the eyes of her critics, back to square one, the so-called social climber with a shadowy past. This video is not just about a celebrity scandal. It's about something far deeper. Image, control, power. The lengths people go to rewrite their narrative, and the enemies lying in wait to tear it all down. We're going to dig into how this happened, why Colin Jost did what he did, and what it says about Meghan's past and the war over her present. We will dissect the images, unpack the meaning behind the infamous Yacht Girl label, and examine the silent chaos that erupted inside Meghan's Montecito home as the photos spread like wildfire. We'll hear from insiders, draw on past rumors, explore Hollywood's dark underbelly, and confront the question many are afraid to ask out loud. Was this leak a brutal joke or a brutal truth? But that's not all. We'll explore Harry's reaction, the royal family's eerie silence, and the deeply personal turmoil that pushed Meghan to an emotional breaking point behind closed doors. Because this wasn't just a scandal. It was a calculated dismantling of a public figure, brick by brick, photo by photo. What would you do if a version of your past you tried desperately to erase came clawing back at the worst possible moment? And what if it wasn't just personal? It was global, with millions judging every pixel of your most vulnerable moments. That's where we begin. Rewind. Years before the palace gates opened to her. Before the world knew her name as anything more than an actress from Suits. Meghan Markle moved in circles most never saw. Not just casting directors and red carpet handlers, but the rarefied air of billionaire yachts, high-end parties in the south of France, and invite-only events hosted by tech moguls, oil princes, and global financiers. It's a world that exists behind tinted glass, guarded by NDAs, and rarely penetrated by the press. But it's real, and those who've been there know it. For years, tabloid outlets floated stories of Meghan's early associations with wealthy men, describing a lifestyle marked not by struggle, but by strategy. It wasn't unusual, they whispered, for ambitious women to be invited aboard yachts, often under the guise of modeling appearances or event hosting, where introductions to influential men were made in exchange for companionship, conversation, or more. These rumors were always denied, dismissed, or ignored. There was never proof. Until now. Colin Jost wasn't just mocking. He was detonating a myth. And it begs the question, why now? Jost, the razor-tongued comedian behind Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, has long been known for pushing the envelope. But this time, he wasn't telling a joke. He was revealing something, or pretending to. And his target wasn't a politician, a public policy, or a pop culture trend. It was a woman with 2 children, a husband, a global spotlight. and a vulnerable brand hanging by a thread. Some say this was comedy's reckoning with Meghan's perceived hypocrisy. Others suggest Jost had access to a source with an agenda, a powerful figure with ties to the yacht scene, or maybe even someone inside Meghan's old world. Whatever the case, this was no accident. This was a strike. The media went into a frenzy. Was it satire? Was it slander? Was it something worse, revenge? Meanwhile, the Sussex PR machine scrambled. Unlike previous scandals, where Meghan had remained quiet and collected, this time, sources claimed she was inconsolable. She had built her new life meticulously. Every interview, every podcast episode, every public appearance was shaped to reinforce her narrative: empowerment, struggle, triumph. This wasn't just a PR problem. It was a personal unraveling. And behind Meghan's reaction lay an even deeper fear, not of the public's judgment, but of the past catching up, of being reduced to a stereotype she had worked so hard to outrun. The so-called socialite, the arm candy, the yacht girl. Not the Duchess, not the activist, but the shadow version of herself, buried in whispered stories and blurry photos. Harry, we're told, was stunned. One insider claimed he had to walk out of the room when Meghan showed him one of the leaked images. Not because he believed the rumors, but because he knew the impact they would have, not just on Meghan, but on their children, their reputation, their future deals. The couple had staked their brand on authenticity, resilience, and reinvention. This wasn't just a PR crisis. It was existential. And what of the royal family? They said nothing. Not a word. No statement. No denial. No gesture of solidarity. Just silence. A vacuum that echoed louder than any headline. Some speculate they were quietly pleased that this scandal would tarnish Meghan and, by extension, justify the royal split. Others believe they were simply watching, waiting to see how it would play out. But the real question is, what happens now? This is more than just leaked photos. It's a collision of past and present, truth and reputation, public perception and private reality. It's a case study in how fame works and how quickly it can turn. We're about to journey through the full story, chapter by chapter. From the first image drop to the private breakdown. From the comedy stage to the digital battleground. From whispers in Hollywood back rooms to the silence of Buckingham Palace. Along the way, you'll hear shocking testimonies, hidden truths, and powerful moments of reflection. Because this isn't just Meghan's story. It's a mirror held up to our obsession with image, reputation, and the cost of reinvention. And it will leave you asking, how much of the truth can any public figure really hide? Stay with us, because by the time this story ends, one thing will be clear. The past doesn't just haunt, it hunts. The internet has seen its fair share of celebrity leaks, from hacked iCloud photos to paparazzi ambushes and fabricated deepfakes. But this time, the eruption was different. It wasn't a tech-savvy hacker or a disgruntled ex that set the fire. It was a comedian, a well-known, mainstream entertainer with millions of followers and a reputation for pushing boundaries. And when Colin Jost uploaded that first photo, the impact was immediate and seismic. The image appeared around 11:42 p.m. Pacific time. Most of the world was winding down. Some were already asleep. Others were mid-scroll through Instagram when Jost's story suddenly appeared. An old, sun-drenched photograph of Meghan Markle, lounging on the deck of a luxury yacht. She was wearing a white swimsuit, a large pair of sunglasses, and holding a glass of champagne. Her smile was effortless. The background revealed a hazy coastline, most likely somewhere in the Mediterranean. The scene exuded wealth, relaxation, and a lifestyle far removed from the narrative the Duchess had worked so hard to maintain in recent years. But it wasn't just the photo that ignited the explosion. It was the caption. Short, brutal, and dripping with condescension. Go back to your yacht days, Meghan. That was it. No explanation. No hashtags. Just those 10 words, and the world tilted. Within 30 minutes, screenshots flooded X, Reddit, and various Instagram accounts dedicated to celebrity gossip and royal watching. Some dismissed it as a crude joke. Others called it an act of war. But the caption's implications were unmistakable. Yacht Days was not a casual reference to past vacations or social events. It was a term long associated with whispered rumors about Meghan's alleged past connections to wealthy men and the high-end parties that took place aboard private superyachts in exotic waters. For years, those rumors were considered speculative at best, rooted in misogyny at worst. They floated on fringe forums and tabloid sites, rarely making it into mainstream discourse. But now, a comedian with a massive platform had brought them to the surface in a spectacularly public fashion. And the photo he shared wasn't the only one. As chaos spread across platforms, more images began appearing. Some from anonymous Twitter accounts, others posted on forums with a history of hosting celebrity leaks. They showed Meghan in various settings, always aboard yachts, always accompanied by wealthy, middle-aged men. In one image, she appeared to be dancing with a man in a tailored linen suit. In another, she was seated on the lap of someone partially obscured by the camera angle, her face turned toward him with a flirtatious smile. The men's faces were never fully visible, but the message these photos carried was loud, provocative, and humiliating. By dawn, the story had been picked up by multiple news outlets. TMZ ran with a headline that asked, "Are these the Meghan Markle yacht photos the internet's been whispering about for years?" The Daily Mail followed closely with a piece simply titled, "Leaked: Meghan's Secret Past?" Even outlets that traditionally avoided salacious royal gossip couldn't resist covering it, if only to comment on the firestorm erupting across social media. It was everywhere. The hashtags #YachtMeghan, #Colin Jost exposed, and #Duchess of Deceit began trending globally. Memes, reaction videos, and TikTok deep dives analyzing every angle of the photos started to multiply by the hour. Some users speculated on the identities of the men in the images, while others compared Meghan's current persona to the carefree, seductive figure captured in the photos. The contrast was stark and damaging. Inside Meghan's Montecito mansion, the mood was reportedly apocalyptic. According to one source close to the Sussex Circle, Meghan was completely blindsided and emotionally wrecked. The source claimed that neither she nor Harry had any idea these photos still existed, or that someone as mainstream as Colin Jost would be the one to unleash them on the world stage. Crisis teams were summoned. Lawyers were contacted, but the damage was already spiraling beyond containment. An emergency meeting with their public relations team was allegedly called just hours after the photos went viral. Meghan, according to those present, was in tears, pacing the room, and shouting about betrayal and defamation. Her team advised caution. Retaliation could inflame the situation further. Any statement could be interpreted as either an admission or a deflection. And attempting to suppress the photos legally might only confirm their authenticity in the public eye. But Meghan wasn't just angry. She was humiliated. The woman who had risen from cable television to become one of the most recognizable figures in the world, who had endured public ridicule, royal disdain, and tabloid cruelty, was now facing a new kind of violation. Not because of what the photos showed per se, but because of what they suggested. They were powerful not for what they proved, but for what they allowed people to believe. This was about reputation. The leak had struck at the very heart of Meghan's carefully controlled image. Since stepping back from royal duties, she had repositioned herself as an advocate for mental health, women's empowerment, and authenticity. Her podcast, her interviews, even her Netflix specials were tailored to showcase a woman who had endured the worst and emerged stronger, wiser, and more independent. Now, the world was being invited to view her through a very different lens, not as a survivor, but as a manipulator. Not as a feminist icon, but as someone whose rise may have been fueled by wealthy male patrons and elite social maneuvering. Fair or not, the implication was catastrophic. Public reaction divided rapidly. One camp viewed the leak as misogynistic and cruel, another example of a powerful woman being dragged down by her past and judged unfairly. These supporters argued that Meghan's alleged associations or behavior prior to her royal marriage were irrelevant, outdated, and framed through a sexist double standard. Celebrities and influencers came to her defense. Statements were made. Posts were shared. Solidarity hashtags began to appear. But there was another camp, just as vocal, who saw the photos as confirmation of everything they had always suspected. To them, Meghan's royal marriage was always strategic. Her image was always manufactured. And this scandal was not just a leak, it was an unveiling. A moment where the facade cracked wide open and the real Meghan stood exposed. Even some in the media, usually cautious in their treatment of royal drama, began to speculate on what this might mean for her future. Could she still position herself as a moral authority? Would brands and platforms continue to partner with her? Was this the beginning of a larger unraveling? Meanwhile, Colin Jost remained silent. Despite hundreds of calls for comment, he issued no clarification, no apology, no statement. His social media accounts remained active, but untouched. Some believed he had gone rogue, using his platform for an impulsive strike at someone he considered disingenuous. Others theorized a deeper motive, that someone with ties to Meghan's past had fed him the images and encouraged him to take the shot. Whatever the reason, his silence only fueled the chaos. Scarlett Johansson, his wife, reportedly was furious and blindsided by his decision to post the image. According to insiders close to the couple, she had no prior knowledge of the leak and urged him to issue a statement and take the images down. Still, he refused. And so, the photos remained. In the span of a single evening, Meghan Markle had gone from a woman attempting to rebrand herself on her own terms to a global punchline and digital cautionary tale. The very platforms she had once used to tell her story were now flooded with images and narratives she could no longer control. This chapter of her life, one she had never intended to revisit, had now become the centerpiece of the world's attention. And as her team scrambled to contain the fallout, one question loomed larger than all others. Was this just the beginning? The yacht photos were no longer just pictures. They were cultural grenades, symbols, weapons, and they had landed in the middle of a war over identity, truth, and reinvention. This was not merely an attack on Meghan Markle's past. It was a declaration of battle on her future. When the world first caught sight of the scandalous yacht photos, many asked the obvious. How did these images even exist? But the deeper question, the one that shook the ground beneath the entertainment industry, was far more unsettling. Why did Colin Jost, of all people, decide to be the face of this expose? To most of the public, Colin Jost was known for his wit, not his weapons. A Harvard graduate, a co-anchor of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update, and a long-standing writer for the sketch comedy institution, Jost built his brand on quick, biting, observational humor. He wasn't seen as a controversy magnet like Ricky Gervais or Dave Chappelle. His comedy leaned clever, sharp, and sarcastic, but not cruel. His punchlines skewered politics, pop culture, and current events, but rarely did they get personal. That's why his direct involvement in a deeply personal leak involving Meghan Markle blindsided so many. This was no offhand joke on a stage. It was a targeted act, one that many believe was premeditated. To understand how we got here, we have to pull back the curtain on the comedian himself. Colin Jost's rise through the entertainment ranks wasn't accidental. He wasn't just a writer on SNL. He was one of its youngest head writers in history. He was, and remains, deeply connected to the inner workings of Hollywood and New York media. Behind the smile and punchlines is a man deeply embedded in elite circles, someone with powerful allies, well-placed friends, and access to a web of influence that stretches far beyond late-night television. This made his decision to publicly attack Meghan even more jarring. Not only did it risk blowback from his own fans and professional circles, but it also opened him up to potential legal consequences. And yet, he did it anyway. So why? Some say it was a calculated move to provoke attention. A comedian pushing boundaries in an age where virality can redefine a career overnight. But others, especially those closer to the situation, suggest something far more personal and pointed. It wasn't about comedy. It was about credibility. It was about narrative. There are whispers, unconfirmed but persistent, that Jost had once encountered Meghan long before her royal days. Some say they met in passing at a celebrity function in Los Angeles. Others claim she was briefly considered for a comedic skit on SNL that was later scrapped after producers deemed her too self-serious for the format. Whether these accounts hold water or not, they paint a picture of a past intersection between two ambitious figures navigating Hollywood in vastly different ways. Jost built his career on satire and self-deprecation. Meghan built hers on image and transformation. Their ideologies didn't align. In his world, no one is untouchable, not even a duchess. In hers, reputation is sacred, curated, and defended at all costs. Still, motive is only part of the mystery. The next question that roiled across media circles was this: how did Colin Jost get the photos? These weren't easily Googleable images. They didn't live in any known database or on any paparazzi archive. They weren't part of Meghan's early acting portfolio or social media history. These were intimate, candid photos, clearly snapped in private spaces, likely aboard yachts in international waters. Some experts speculated that they had been part of a private collection never meant to be public. The kind of content shared among exclusive circles, shielded from the masses by powerful non-disclosure agreements and money. Which meant only one thing: someone with access leaked them. And Jost had a. There's a theory gaining traction in underground media forums that the photos were leaked to Jost by a known Hollywood fixer, a former security consultant turned whistleblower who had grown disillusioned with the hypocrisy of celebrity culture. This individual, whose name has not been made public, is believed to have kept a trove of digital files documenting the behavior of various high-profile figures during the early 2010s. Meghan, it's speculated, was among them. If that's true, then Colin Jost didn't just stumble upon the images. He received them with full awareness of their power. That would place him not just as a comedian making a tasteless joke, but as the willing mouthpiece for a calculated strike. And that's where things get even murkier. Because Jost didn't follow up the leak with a punchline. He didn't backtrack or contextualize it as satire. He simply went silent. No tweet. No Instagram Live. No appearance on SNL to address the controversy. Just a wall of silence that fueled speculation further. Some claimed this is Jost's version of performance art, an attempt to blend reality and satire in a way that blurs ethical boundaries and forces society to reckon with its obsession with image. But others believe it's something more dangerous. That Jost, knowingly or not, has become a weapon in someone else's war against Meghan Markle. If so, who benefits from that war? Certainly not Jost's inner circle. Reports from sources close to Scarlett Johansson suggest she was blindsided by her husband's decision. One insider claimed she had no knowledge of what Colin was planning and strongly advised against making it worse. She has remained silent publicly, but several entertainment journalists noted her absence from a charity gala the following night, where she was expected to appear alongside Jost. Hollywood, too, is conflicted. Comedians have rallied in defense of free speech, arguing that public figures, especially ones with controversial histories, are fair game. But producers, agents, and brand managers are more nervous. Jost's actions may have drawn attention, but they've also opened a Pandora's box that could damage careers and unravel relationships far beyond just the Duchess. Still, Jost remains unbothered, at least in appearance. His most recent sighting was outside a comedy club in Manhattan, where he declined to comment on the photos but was overheard telling a colleague, "The truth doesn't care about feelings." Whether that was a pointed jab or a throwaway line is unknown, but it was enough to fuel another round of headlines. And then there's the legal angle. Meghan's team has remained publicly silent, but several attorneys in her orbit have been unusually active behind the scenes. According to multiple insiders, cease and desist letters have been drafted, though not yet served. The challenge, of course, is proving defamation when the photos themselves appear to be authentic, and the commentary, while cruel, could be defended as comedic expression or social commentary. Jost's legal team, reportedly, is prepared to argue that his post was a satire aimed at critiquing the public's obsession with reinvention, not an accusation or declaration of fact. If that argument holds, Meghan's legal options could be limited. And yet, something about this still feels deeply personal. Whether Colin Jost meant to expose a hypocrisy, deliver a joke, or simply watch the world burn, one thing is clear: he didn't act randomly. This wasn't an impulsive upload during a late-night scroll. It was deliberate, chosen, timed. Why did he do it? Some say it was to defend comedy's right to challenge the powerful. Others say it was a vendetta dressed in humor. But perhaps, in the end, it was about something simpler: the thrill of disruption, the power to tilt the narrative, and the knowledge that, for a brief moment, one man could bring the world's most carefully guarded public persona crashing down with a single caption. In an age where reputations are built on carefully curated images and protected by millions of dollars in branding, Colin Jost threw a wrench into the machinery. He reminded the world that no image is invincible, and that sometimes the real story isn't what's seen in public, but what someone dares to reveal. 10 words. That's all it took. 10 words that reverberated through tabloids, trended across continents, and carved a permanent scar into Meghan Markle's already complicated legacy. Go back to your yacht days, Meghan. It wasn't just a caption. It was a provocation, a public undressing of the persona she had so carefully built since entering royal life, since stepping back from it, and since re-emerging as a media mogul with a humanitarian edge. This quote, delivered by Colin Jost with the seemingly effortless cruelty of satire, became more than a punchline. It was a cultural grenade lobbed into the digital town square, and its explosion triggered a wave of speculation, memory excavation, and brutal public discourse that would not die down. For Meghan, it wasn't merely an insult, it was a reminder, a statement that suggested her reinvention was a facade, that the version of herself she had worked years to create was rooted in something artificial, and maybe even transactional. But let's dissect why this particular phrase, of all things, landed like a hammer strike to the temple. The phrase, yacht days, isn't just about boats or luxury leisure. In the undercurrents of celebrity gossip and online rumor mills, it's code. Not for vacations or innocent summer fun, but for a specific kind of high society mingling that happens behind closed doors, or more accurately, behind tinted yacht glass. It's a euphemism, one loaded with implication, a phrase that walks a tightrope between suggestion and accusation. To understand the weight behind those words, we must understand the folklore they're tied to. Over the past decade, whispers of Meghan's yacht days circulated like a virus in certain circles. Blogs, anonymous social media accounts, and tabloid publications based in Europe and the Middle East had for years carried threads alleging that before her time on Suits, and even during her early Hollywood climb, Meghan had been spotted aboard private luxury yachts, not as a guest of friends or an invited actress, but as what some sources described as an event girl, a term that, in that world, can mean anything from hired social companion to covert model for hire. These rumors were unverified. No publication with real legal liability touched them. No credible source ever stepped forward with first-hand confirmation. Meghan herself has never addressed them, nor would any reputable platform dare ask such a question directly. And yet, they lived on, quietly, persistently, in the dark corners of online gossip forums and the whispered exchanges of Hollywood insiders. Then came Colin Jost. In 10 words, he took that quiet rumor and screamed it through a megaphone into the mainstream. It wasn't simply that he said, yacht days. It was the way he said it, casually, dismissively, like a man commenting on an old high school yearbook photo of someone pretending to be someone else now. It wasn't humor. It was a challenge, a stripping down of the modern Meghan, juxtaposed against a version of her that many believed existed and she had buried long ago. Social media exploded. Within minutes of the photo's release and the quote's circulation, debate erupted across platforms. Was Jost calling her out? Was it slut-shaming? Misogyny in comedic clothing? Or was he pulling back the curtain on something true that no one had the courage or cruelty to say out loud until now? The quote became a meme. Within hours, videos were being stitched on TikTok, showing clips from Meghan's Netflix documentary side by side, with blurry stills from the leaked yacht photos, while the caption, "Go back to your yacht days," flashed across the screen in mocking text overlays. On Twitter, threads emerged explaining the hidden meaning of the term yacht girl, drawing connections to other women in Hollywood who had faced similar allegations of association with billionaire circles during their early careers. And for Meghan, the quote's damage wasn't just reputational, it was psychological. Sources from inside Montecito claimed she was devastated not just by the photos, but by the phrasing. The idea that her entire journey, her advocacy, her rebranding, could be reduced to a single snide comment was emotionally annihilating. The quote wasn't a fact. It was a sentence designed to reopen a wound and pour salt inside it. What made the line cut deeper was the tone behind it. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even overtly vicious. It was mocking, sarcastic, and that sarcasm carried the sting of disbelief. Like Jost wasn't just exposing something, but ridiculing the idea that anyone ever believed otherwise. He wasn't just making fun of her alleged past. He was laughing at the very notion that she ever successfully distanced herself from it. That laughter echoed. In celebrity culture, transformation is currency. Reinvention sells. From Madonna to Lady Gaga to the Kardashians, The ability to evolve, to shed old skin and present a new version of oneself, is part of the game. But that evolution requires something critical: control. Meghan had built an empire of controlled storytelling, carefully curated interviews, strategically dropped podcasts, selective partnerships with brands that aligned with her image as a modern feminist icon and cultural disruptor. Go back to your yacht days. Meghan shattered that control in one sentence. It was the anti-rebrand, the return to sender stamp on a public persona she had tried to ship far away from the woman in those photos. Worse still, it suggested not just a past, but a pattern. That what the public had accepted as growth was actually performance. That the palace exile, the public sob stories, the talk of being silenced, were all just chapters in a script. And that's what made the quote so toxic. Because it wasn't just judgment. It was delegitimization. In the days following the leak, media analysis shows the phrase appeared over 180,000 times across social platforms. Dozens of influencers made content reacting solely to those 10 words. Pundits, comedians, and even political commentators weighed in, offering takes that ranged from condemnation to applause. It was, as one writer for Vanity Fair put it, the shortest royal scandal headline in modern memory. But here's the rub. The people laughing didn't all agree on what they were laughing at. Some saw Jost's words as a righteous takedown of someone they viewed as a manipulator. Others saw it as a blatant sexist jab, proof that no woman, no matter how high she rises, can escape the claws of character assassination when men decide to come for her. There were even those who saw it as brilliant satire, a meta-commentary on the public's insatiable desire to see women fail, especially those who dare rebrand themselves as powerful. But regardless of interpretation, the phrase stuck. For Meghan, the damage was already done. There was no walking it back, no clarifying it, no defending it without breathing more oxygen into the fire. And that, perhaps, was the cruelest trick of all, because the quote operated like a virus. Even if you tried to swat it away, deny it, or ignore it, it had already infected the narrative. Behind palace walls and PR firm conference rooms, spin doctors scrambled to find a countermessage. But how do you fight back against something so pithy, so viral, so culturally loaded? Meghan could speak for hours about her experience with racism, misogyny, mental health struggles, and betrayal. But all it took was 10 words from a man holding a phone to reduce her to a caricature again. A woman with history she couldn't outrun. A brand she could no longer control. A past she no longer owned. And so, go back to your yacht days. Meghan went from caption to cultural flashpoint. Not just a joke, not just a dig, but a line of dialogue in the modern war over celebrity narratives. A reminder that no matter how far one climbs, the internet never forgets. And sometimes, it waits years for just the right moment to drag you back. When the first image surfaced. Meghan Markle sunbathing on the deck of a luxurious yacht in the Mediterranean. Many assumed it was nothing more than an old vacation photo, perhaps taken during her Suits era or even earlier. A harmless glimpse into a glamorous but private moment. But as the hours ticked by and more images poured onto the internet, a darker picture began to emerge. One not simply about yachts or fame, but about intimacy, implications, and a potential history of carefully concealed relationships that now threatened to redefine how the world saw her. The photos weren't just casual snapshots. They were moments of high intimacy, caught in private settings, among powerful men whose identities were hidden but whose influence was palpable. Meghan appeared in various poses, each one loaded with context that, while open to interpretation, was undeniably suggestive. In one photo, she's perched on a chaise lounge, her body angled toward a suited man who leans in closely, whispering something into her ear. Her expression is relaxed, laughing, with her hand brushing his knee. The backdrop is unmistakably elite, a sprawling superyacht with polished wood decks, champagne bottles on ice, and crew members in white uniforms in the distant background. In another, more controversial shot, Meghan is seated on the edge of a hot tub, partially submerged, wearing a plunging black swimsuit. A man's arm is wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. His face is obscured, but his watch, an unmistakably custom gold timepiece, sparked wild speculation. Some claimed it matched one worn by a notorious Middle Eastern billionaire. Others insisted it belonged to a well-known Hollywood studio executive. The debate only intensified the mystery. Then came the third image, arguably the most damaging of all. Meghan, lying back on a padded deck bench, her legs draped across the lap of a man with graying hair and a dark tan. She's holding a glass of red wine, her face tilted toward him in what appears to be a kiss, though the angle makes it impossible to confirm whether their lips are touching. What can't be denied is the comfort between them. The body language spoke volumes. This wasn't a red carpet encounter. It wasn't the kind of distance-keeping image one might expect between a rising actress and a powerful benefactor. This was something closer, intimate, perhaps romantic. And with every share, retweet, and screen grab, the damage compounded. Not because any single photo proved wrongdoing, but because the collective effect reintroduced a wave of suspicions that Meghan had spent years trying to outrun. Whispers of transactional relationships, strategic companionships, and elite social climbing through connections that weren't always about acting gigs or philanthropy. To be clear, no photo showed overt sexual content. There were no nude images, no explicit scenes, nothing that would technically qualify as revenge porn or criminal. But in the court of public opinion, the line between implication and confirmation is often razor thin. And that's where Meghan's team found themselves helpless. The question that immediately flooded the digital space was, what do these photos really show? Were they evidence of a young woman enjoying elite social circles before her royal days? Or were they something more layered, more suggestive of relationships built on arrangements and opportunity? According to one insider who claimed to have worked security on several yachts in Monaco between 2011 and 2014, these parties were rarely innocent. The man, who chose to remain anonymous, spoke to a European tabloid and described the dynamic as a revolving door of actresses, models, and influencers, flown in for private events hosted by billionaires. When asked if Meghan Markle was ever among them, he hesitated before saying, "I saw a lot of faces. Some I recognized later when they became famous." These kinds of statements fueled the firestorm. Even if unverified, they reinforced a narrative many were quick to believe. That Meghan had once moved through a world where appearance, charm, and presence were currency, and where the lines between networking and intimacy were often blurred. But let's step back. It's important to ask, were these photos truly evidence of impropriety, or were they simply snapshots of a young woman navigating elite spaces, much like hundreds of other aspiring talents do in Hollywood and beyond? After all, being photographed on a yacht isn't a crime, nor is dancing with a wealthy man, sharing a bottle of wine, or laughing under the sun. Context matters, and so does framing. The problem is, in an age of weaponized imagery, framing is everything. Each photo told a story, and each viewer interpreted that story based on their existing beliefs about Meghan. Supporters saw a woman being dragged through the mud for having a past, for daring to be human, for enjoying her youth. Critics saw the images as receipts, proof that her rise wasn't built on merit but on manipulation. And everyone else? They watched, clicked, judged, and kept scrolling. Adding another layer of complexity was the question of how the photos were obtained. Sources close to Meghan's team insisted these were private, never-before-seen images taken without consent and likely passed along through multiple hands before landing in Colin Jost's possession. The legal implications of this were murky. While none of the photos appeared to have been stolen from personal devices, they clearly came from private events where attendees would have expected discretion, if not legal confidentiality. The men in the photos, notably, have not been identified, nor have any come forward to clarify or defend the images. This silence only intensified curiosity. Who were they? Why were their faces blurred, cropped, or turned away? Were they protecting their identities, or were they being protected by others? Some speculated that high-powered lawyers had already stepped in to prevent identification, citing possible damage to business reputations or political connections. Behind closed doors, Meghan was reportedly enraged not just by the exposure, but by the suggestions buried beneath the surface of every tweet, every article, every speculative podcast episode that began to circulate. In one private moment relayed by a friend of the Sussexes, Meghan allegedly screamed, "They're trying to make me into someone I never was." It was less about the pictures themselves, and more about what they represented. a complete hijacking of her public image, driven by innuendo rather than truth. And yet, even within Meghan's circle, there were fractures. A source formerly close to her from her acting days in Toronto told a Canadian publication that Meghan was always strategic, always looking for the next opportunity. That doesn't mean she did anything wrong, but she definitely knew how to move in the right circles. This wasn't said with malice, but with a kind of resigned honesty. The kind of statement that didn't confirm the worst, but didn't entirely dispel it either. Public relations experts weighed in. Some advised silence. Others suggested a full-throated denial paired with legal threats. But none could offer a path that would truly erase the images from public memory. In an age where the internet never forgets, the photos had become etched into the cultural fabric of Meghan's story, regardless of their authenticity or intention. Meghan's defenders mobilized. Influential figures in Hollywood and progressive media circles began speaking out. The narrative was reframed. This wasn't a scandal, it was a sexist smear. A hit job. A reawakening of the Madonna whore complex, where women who present as empowered are torn down the moment old images reappear that show them as carefree, sensual, or in control of their sexuality. This isn't about the photos, one feminist columnist wrote. It's about policing female transformation. Still, others remained unconvinced. The central argument among Meghan's critics was this. It wasn't just about partying or youth. It was about pattern. That from her early days on Deal or No Deal, to her fast ascension in the acting world, to her high-profile marriage into royalty, Meghan had always navigated elite male-dominated spaces with uncanny precision. The photos, in their eyes, were simply visual footnotes to a larger story. In the days that followed, attempts were made to verify the origins of the images. Digital forensics experts pored over metadata and pixel details, concluding that the photos had likely been taken between 2012 and 2014, using high-end professional-grade cameras, likely by staff or freelance photographers hired to document yacht events. This supported theories that the images had circulated in private collections for years before being leaked. If that's true, it raises an even more sinister question. Why now? Why, after nearly a decade, were these images suddenly public? Who had the motive to unleash them at this moment? And what did they hope to gain? That question would be explored in later chapters. But for now, the reality was simple and chilling. The photos showed more than just Meghan's body. They revealed the fragility of control, the illusion of privacy, and the brutal efficiency with which a woman's narrative can be flipped in the span of a few leaked images. For Meghan, they were more than pictures. They were a reckoning. It was a strange kind of silence that settled over Montecito in the hours following the explosion. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort but compresses, like air tightening around glass just before it shatters. The world was speaking, loudly, viciously, with breathless urgency. Headlines raced across digital news tickers. Hashtags swirled like tornadoes. Podcasts dropped impromptu episodes. Late-night talk show hosts circled the scandal like vultures waiting for the moment to dive in. But within the sun-soaked walls of Meghan and Harry's California home, there was a different kind of noise. None. Not yet. According to insiders close to the Sussex household, Meghan's initial reaction wasn't rage. It wasn't public denial. It wasn't even defensive strategizing. It was stillness. The kind that follows shock. The kind where a mind moves too fast for a mouth to form words. She had seen the photos. She had read the caption. And in that moment, there was no rehearsed response, no clever spin, no damage control instinct strong enough to override the sheer disbelief of betrayal. She sat in the media room, curtains drawn, lights dimmed, her phone in her lap, untouched. The images were already everywhere. She didn't need to scroll. Her assistant had shown her the post. Her heart already knew what the internet was about to do. She had lived through it before. The palace press wars. The birth certificate controversies. The headlines about Archie's skin color. But this was different. Because this wasn't the Crown's fault. It wasn't a hit job from Fleet Street or a smear by the tabloids she'd long sued or avoided. This was a direct hit from someone she barely knew. A comedian. A Hollywood peer. Someone close enough to matter but distant enough to strike without warning. And somehow, that betrayal, this casual brutality from someone in her supposed orbit, cut deeper than the royal knives ever had. The storm hadn't broken yet, but Meghan felt it in her bones. Across the house, Harry was pacing. Unlike Meghan, he was already in motion. Furious, frantic, and helpless. His rage had nowhere to go. He couldn't call Jost, not that it would help. He couldn't call the royal family. God knows they'd only respond with silence or smugness. And the legal teams? They were alert but hesitant. Because once again, the reality was cruelly inconvenient. The photos weren't fake. The insinuations were unfair, perhaps, but the visuals were real. Still, he wanted to act. He wanted to protect her. He wanted to fight. But as Meghan finally spoke, slowly, barely above a whisper, she said something that stopped him cold. If we fight this, it becomes our story. If we stay quiet, it's still theirs. That line lingered in the air like smoke. For a woman who had built a reputation on speaking her truth, choosing silence was uncharacteristic. But in this moment, it wasn't cowardice. It was calculation. Meghan understood something most public figures eventually learn the hard way. There are some fires that grow bigger when you try to smother them. And yet, silence doesn't mean surrender. Behind closed doors, the gears of war began to turn. Her crisis PR team was assembled before sunrise. Trusted allies flew in from LA, communications specialists arrived under NDAs, and private investigators were reportedly hired to trace the origin of the leak. Every laptop in the house was scrubbed. Every known associate from her early career days was reevaluated. Not in fear, but in focus. Because Meghan knew one thing for certain. Someone gave those photos to Colin Jost. And whoever did had waited a long time to do it. The first meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. Meghan was composed, though visibly shaken. She wore a cream sweater and no makeup, her voice steady but clipped. She laid out 2 options: ignore it or control it. The team debated furiously. One faction urged a swift public response. A written statement denouncing the photos as an invasion of privacy and condemning the use of a woman's past to smear her present. The other side warned that engaging would only validate the narrative, that even denying the worst parts would confirm that something needed denying. Meghan listened. Then she spoke one word: observe. For the next 24 hours, the strategy was to do nothing publicly. Not a post, not a leak, not a whisper. Let the story breathe, expand, expose its true architects. Because sometimes, in the absence of new fuel, a fire reveals the direction it wants to burn. This period, what many later called the silent window, was eerie. Meghan's social media pages remained untouched. No Instagram story of calm domestic life. No vague inspirational quote. Nothing. And for the internet, that silence became a canvas onto which people projected their assumptions. Some read it as guilt, others as dignity. But what no one could deny was that something significant was happening behind the scenes. And that's exactly what Meghan intended. Because while she remained publicly mute, her network began quietly activating. Feminist journalists began threading long posts about the politics of reputation and how women's sexuality is weaponized to discredit their credibility. Several well-placed celebrities, from former co-stars to podcast hosts, issued subtle posts in support of privacy, image exploitation, and the dangers of toxic media narratives. None mentioned Meghan directly, but the timing was clear. Then came the first leak from within Meghan's camp. A brief statement, unattributed, to a favored entertainment journalist. This isn't the first time someone tried to silence Meghan by digging into the past. It won't work. The quote was vague enough to avoid legal backlash. But it was intentional. It reframed Meghan not as a scandalized figure, but as a woman under attack. A victim of retroactive shaming. A target of misogynistic hysteria. And while it didn't stop the internet from churning, it did shift the tone, slightly, from spectacle to debate. Still, Meghan was waiting. Watching. Her calm wasn't born of peace. It was the calm of a chess master several moves ahead. Because what no one knew yet, not the press, not Jost, not even most of her team, was that Meghan had been keeping records. She had, over the years, compiled extensive documentation of interactions, photos, and even digital trails that traced back to some of the very people now dragging her name. Not as blackmail, not as revenge, but as insurance. And now, that insurance might be called in. Meanwhile, Harry continued to push for action. According to one confidant, he argued that they needed to fight fire with fire. He wanted legal letters sent immediately. He wanted a televised interview. He wanted to call out the hypocrisy, the cruelty, the absurdity of pretending that past relationships somehow invalidate present truth. But Meghan, as always, understood the performance of power better. Let them talk, she told them late one night. Let them assume. Because the moment we speak, we change the rules. And right now, they're revealing exactly who they are. In the background, their children played, oblivious to the storm brewing outside their carefully protected bubble. That, more than anything, was what hurt Meghan the most. Not the embarrassment, not the suspicion, but the idea that someday her children might Google her name and find lies masquerading as history. That a moment of laughter aboard a yacht could be twisted into a lifetime of shame. Still, she didn't cry. Not this time. She stood at the window, looking out at the California sky, and said quietly to no one in particular, "They want a reaction. I'll give them a reckoning." The calm before the storm wasn't weakness. It was precision. It was a woman holding her silence like a sword. For Prince Harry, the leaked photos of Meghan weren't just an attack on his wife. They were an assault on his life's second act, his reinvention, his choices, and the very story he had risked everything to tell. The images not only cracked open Meghan's past, but threatened to unravel the post-royal identity they had spent years and millions carefully sculpting together. Overnight, he found himself torn between two unrelenting instincts. The protective husband desperate to shield his partner from public humiliation, and the media-savvy exile who understood, all too well, the brutal game being played. Sources close to the couple say Harry's reaction to the leaked yacht photos was visceral. He didn't see the images online. He was shown them by a member of his team who thought he needed to know before the story got worse. And as the images scrolled by, Meghan in swimsuits, champagne in hand, her body language dangerously familiar with men they couldn't identify. Harry's silence was deafening. His hands clenched. His jaw set. Then came the outburst. He reportedly smashed a ceramic mug on the edge of a countertop, shouting, "How the hell did this happen?" before storming out of the room. His fury wasn't directed at Meghan, nor even at Jost. It was at the world. The same world that had haunted his mother to death. The same machinery that hounded him and his brother through their teens, now sharpening its knives again. Only this time, at the woman he had walked away from a kingdom for. But even rage has limits. And once it cooled, the dilemma set in. Harry's life, post-royalty, had become an elaborate balancing act between authenticity and optics. On one hand, he'd styled himself as a man of conviction, a husband willing to burn bridges for love, a father prioritizing mental health, a global citizen shedding the old skin of privilege. But on the other hand, he was still a Windsor, trained from birth in the art of public image, protocol, and subtle retaliation. He knew better than anyone that perception is power. And now, perception was slipping out of his hands. Privately, Harry wanted war. He wanted to name and shame. To go on camera, look the public in the eye, and dismantle every narrative that the photos ignited. He wanted to lay bare the misogyny, the manipulation, the crude voyeurism behind Colin Jost's caption. He drafted a few lines for a potential statement, something firm, protective, and unapologetic. But his advisors, seasoned in Hollywood media strategy, urged restraint. Every quote keeps the story alive, one of them warned. Every comment becomes a headline. You want this to go away? Don't feed it. And yet, that wasn't the only voice Harry had to contend with. Within the couple's inner circle, some of Meghan's own supporters encouraged a different tactic. Use Harry. Have him speak as a man, a husband, a father. Let him become the emotional face of the scandal's fallout, not to defend Meghan, but to humanize her. Frame the story not as an exposé of some buried past, but as an example of how even powerful women are still reduced, still shamed, still stalked by a culture eager to tear them down. It was compelling. It was calculated. And Harry hated it. He wasn't a spin doctor. Not anymore. He wasn't willing to manipulate emotions, even if it meant winning the narrative. He wanted to tell the truth. But even that presented a problem. What truth? That Meghan had a past? That she'd once moved in elite circles where relationships were sometimes transactional? That she'd done what many rising stars had done to survive and thrive in a brutal industry? None of it was illegal. None of it made her unworthy of love. But would the public understand that? Or would they weaponize it against her, and by extension, against him? He wrestled with the idea of a full interview. Sit down, face the camera, tell their side. But every scenario came with a trap. If he denied everything, and someone leaked more proof, an email, a name, another photo, they'd be labeled liars. If he admitted that Meghan had been part of a social scene filled with wealthy men and questionable power dynamics, it would become tabloid fodder for years. And if he stayed silent, that might be seen as weakness, or worse, agreement. So Harry turned inward. He began calling old contacts, not media outlets, but trusted allies from his royal days. People who had remained silent through the chaos, who hadn't chosen sides when he stepped away from the firm. He wanted advice. But more than that, he wanted clarity. And what he heard shocked him. One former aide told him bluntly, "This was inevitable, Harry. You didn't marry a duchess. You married a survivor. And survivors have stories." Another reminded him, "The press doesn't care about truth. They care about narrative. You can't win. You can only outlast." Those words stuck with him. Because deep down, Harry knew the truth wasn't simple. Meghan wasn't perfect. She'd made decisions in her past that she wouldn't want plastered across headlines. So had he. But the world was never interested in fairness. Especially not when it came to a biracial American woman who had married into the oldest monarchy on earth and dared to walk away. And so, the dilemma deepened. Harry was still processing his own trauma. The years of manipulation, media war, and palace silence had left scars that still bled beneath the surface. Seeing Meghan, his wife, the mother of his children, now painted in lewd, suggestive light triggered every protective impulse inside him. But he also knew the cost of missteps. One wrong move could burn what little credibility they had left. Eventually, after days of silence and internal debates, Harry wrote a private letter. Not to the media, not to Jost, but to Meghan. A handwritten note, left on her bedside table. It read, "You are not the woman in those photos. You are not anyone else's caption. You are the woman who carried me through fire, who showed me how to be more than a title. And I will not let them take that from you." It was personal, raw, unpolished, but it was what she needed to hear. Because while the public demanded statements and clarity, what Meghan needed was certainty from him. Not just in the face of scandal, but in the quiet terror of being stripped of dignity by a world that never truly forgave her for entering it. Harry would eventually speak publicly, but not yet. He chose instead to act from the background, coordinating with lawyers, tracking digital footprints, and engaging crisis managers who specialized in character rehabilitation. But in private, he was exactly what Meghan needed, a husband, not a handler. And that, ultimately, was the decision he made. He would not play spin doctor. He would not reframe the story. He would not treat his marriage like a press campaign. He would stand beside her, not in front. Even as the world screamed for sound bites, Prince Harry chose silence, not as surrender, but as loyalty. And in that silence, a new battle plan was born. The worst part about the internet isn't its speed. It's its memory. It doesn't forget. Not after a few hours, not after a few years. And for someone like Meghan Markle, whose public identity depended on reinvention, on reintroduction, on letting go of who she once was, the reemergence of her alleged yacht days was more than a scandal. It was a spiritual unearthing, a tearing open of doors she thought were long shut and locked. Now they stood ajar, flung open by 10 words and a few photos, with every passerby welcome to peer inside. The world had moved on from Meghan's past. Or so she believed. After all, she had remade herself successfully more than once. From cable TV actress to stylish lifestyle blogger. From working royal to global humanitarian voice. Each step had been upward. Every stumble had been smoothed by PR spin, selective interviews, and careful content curation. Her past, with all its complexity and rough edges, had been scrubbed to fit the Duchess narrative. It wasn't a lie, just a quieter version of the truth. But now, the rough edges were all anyone could see. The term, yacht girl, began appearing with ruthless frequency across the web. It didn't matter that it was vague, slippery, and rooted in misogynistic rumor culture. It had found traction, not because it was necessarily true, but because it was provocative. It cast Meghan in a different light. A cinematic light. A woman of strategy, mystery, and whispers. It played into every trope that people had long debated about her, but never confirmed. Now, confirmation wasn't required. Implication was enough. Old posts began to resurface. Screenshots of gossip forum threads dating back to 2014. Blog posts from anonymous writers hinting at actresses who spend their summers on yachts in Monaco. One particularly detailed post, written nearly a decade ago, described an American actress who matched Meghan's profile to a chilling degree. It mentioned a woman known for being charming, multilingual, and adept at navigating elite company. No names were mentioned, but the digital sleuths of Reddit and TikTok didn't need them. They had the photos now. The dots connected themselves. People began digging deeper. Videos emerged of Meghan attending high-end social functions in Europe, fundraisers, art shows, and galas where the guest lists were more exclusive than diplomatic banquets. In one clip, she is seen chatting with an oil magnate from Qatar. In another, she's in a private box at a Formula One event, seated beside a billionaire hotelier whose name never made the tabloids. None of these moments were damning on their own, but together, they formed a narrative. One that hinted at access, influence, and positioning. For Meghan, the resurgence of this buried past was especially cruel because it was based on fragments, not facts. She had indeed attended yacht parties. She had accepted invitations to luxury events, sometimes as a guest, sometimes as a promotional fig.